a bit of a crazy quilt of different subjects. So we're going from impossible foods and plant-based meats to a conversation around how digital commerce is going to help us in Asia Pacific with the recovery. We have an all-star panel lined up to talk to you about the kind of back to business and what are those opportunities for digital commerce as Asia goes through its recovery. So I'm going to turn over to Chavi Jafa, who's the head of Visa Business Solutions for Asia Pacific at Visa, and Visa is the main stage sponsor. So thank you very much for your sponsorship. And Chavi, over to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Walter. And welcome to everybody who's on here listening in to us today. It's absolutely fantastic being in this session, because of the community and the startup community and all the fantastic ideas that we've been listening in. We joined a little bit earlier and it was a great conversation that we heard in the previous panel. So thanks again. I do have the pleasure to be joined by a great set of panelists today. And let me take a little bit of time to introduce you to them and we can then get started with the conversation. So we have three additional panelists who will be joining me today. Our first panelist is David Rosso. David is the CEO and co-founder of Meet, which is a fintech company that helps SME businesses grow internationally. David started his career with Citibank, and he was the youngest MD at Citi in Asia Pacific, right, David? And then, of course, he went on to co-found the Asian arm of Integral Capital Management, and then sold that and moved into the fintech space. So a lot of experience across what we would call a larger corporate, and then, of course, fintech, and great experience in the space. Our second panelist is David Tan. David is the VP for Strategic Solutions and Product Development at Global Payments. Global Payments, as we know, is one of the key acquiring partners and key firms that work to provide a lot of merchant solutions and very focused on digitization. And Donald leads a lot of the product and the solution delivery to support businesses with their online payments opportunity and solutioning that they require. And finally, last but absolutely not the least, we have Eric Ng. Eric is the founder of Boutir, which is a social mobile commerce solutions provider. And Eric, again, has been an entrepreneur for the last decade. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2010, you founded Redso, which is a leading mobile app development company. And from what I understand, it has about 100 different mobile apps and multi-million downloads. So great set of panelists today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So let's get right into the discussion for today. The topic is very timely. The topic is around back to business, and really what are some of the opportunities around digital commerce, specifically what we are seeing in the small business space and how we think about the road to recovery. And, as we all know, small businesses, they are the backbone of every economy. And as we've seen over the last 3 months, they definitely have been more impacted given the vulnerable nature of, a small business and how they run their businesses. And we've seen some very interesting trends. Some of the trends that we've been monitoring is the shift to digitization. And just given that digitization and online commerce was already something that was very key, we've just seen that accelerate over the last 3 months. So with that, let me actually open it up to the first question that I had, and I had this for all the panelists, and maybe Eric, we could start with you, is it's a twofold question I had. One is, how has the pandemic affected your business and your end clients? So would love to hear from you first, and then we'll go through with the other panelists.
Yes. So definitely we got a lot of being affected by the COVID, but fortunately it's in a positive way, because from our figures, after the outbreak of COVID, during the 2 months, our performance figures actually grow for 2.5 times. So be it like GMV, number of transactions, number of merchants, it grew very dramatically after the outbreak of COVID. I think the reason is all those business, different kinds of business, they are looking for ways to go online, but they have some pain point because many of them, they do not have they are not very experienced in digital world. They don't know how to tackle with very complicated system. So I think the solution to them is to really have very simple system that can integrate good payment system, logistic, or even like how they can promote their product in a digital way through different kinds of social network, advertising network. So the key is how we can integrate these different kinds of system and then provide them a very simple way to sell things online. So I think the solution would be like this one.
Great, thank you, Eric. And I think that's a great piece that you touched upon, which is digitization of a business overall. And we are seeing that even with businesses, I think, Eric, you'll agree, right? Businesses that had an online presence, which now need to kind of, expand that, but then also businesses that were brick and mortar, and given, the restrictions on mobility, the immediate need, whether it's storefronts or payment capabilities, the ability to accept payments, make payments, and just other methods of running their business, we're beginning to see that as a big, big theme. So maybe, Donald, you can add a little bit to that. I'd love to hear from you on how you're seeing, some of the key themes that are coming out of the current situation.
Well, I think to your questions, how the pandemic has affected global payments business, and our business is in the business of processing payments. So we have been processing payments for both the online as well as the brick and mortar. So quite clearly, I think no different from a lot of the trends that we have seen already is the shift to the online world. And what used to be traditionally demarked as what we call cross-border and domestic transactions, and sort of taken a very different view of it. And to a certain extent, our our customers, especially those that traditionally, which may not have taken a very keen view of going online, has, to your point, has actually totally changed overnight. They are looking at, they are actually calling my colleagues and says, hey, do you have a way for me to just get online and sell? And I think that's very typified with what you see on the social commerce, the social platform. I mean, what would be very common for a lot of places, and where I am as well, is that you suddenly see, if I may put it, fishmonger selling their fish on Facebook live stream, right? And they want to have a way to collect money, and that's where I think we see a sudden shift, and therefore the need for them to get paid. How do they collect the orders, and how do they get paid in a secure, in a guaranteed fashion? So I think that's really the key thing we are seeing, not so much back to business, but to carry on the business that they are doing today. So I think that's really the key thing that's affecting our business. At the same time, seeing the reaction from the businesses that we serve that used to be traditionally offline, like the fishmonger, for example, would be a key trend profile of what how it's affecting our business, and how, as a business, we are responding to enabling them to go online. I think to Eric's point, in the most simplified simplification, so that they don't have to worry about the tech. They just have to do what they do best and get the commerce online.
Great, and that's such a good example, Donald, because I think a lot of the micro businesses or sole entrepreneurs in our world, what we'd call, like the example you gave of the fishmonger, where they kind of went, probably either sat in a marketplace physically or went door to door, or that kind of a ecosystem. The need to kind of go immediately online and be able to, receive orders, but also receive payments, is very critical. And let's come back to that, Donald, because I'd love to hear, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of great stuff that you guys are working on. So we'll come back to that in a bit on what are some of those solutions we are seeing. But let me ask David. David, your business is focused on small businesses and also helping them grow internationally. And so what are some of the trends that you've seen over the last few months, and probably what you're seeing for yourself as a company, but also for your end clients?
Sure. So first of all, we call this an unfortunate opportunity, but the reality is that COVID for us has been a huge enabler for business. Now, if you look at the type of customer base that we serve, which is, yes, the SMEs, specifically exporters from this region into primarily Europe. And in terms of the export business, there's been a big distinction that we've noticed between the exporters of goods and exporters of services. That's been a major, major change. No surprises that because of the collapse of demand for primarily goods, not only in Europe, but also in the rest of the Western world, we have seen supply chains grinding to a terrible halt. And so, no secret that some of our customers in the traditional industries have been suffering from that front. However, very, very crafty SMEs, very flexible, very entrepreneurial. A lot of people have changed what they actually sell, which is a challenge, by the way, from a compliance point of view. So it's kept us very busy, very much on our toes. However, you need to work with the customers as much as possible to enable them to grow their business internationally. So no surprise, there's been a lot of pickup in the trading of personal protection equipment, medical equipment in general, from traditional supply chains. So that's what's happening on the goods side of things. But perhaps even more interestingly, on the services side of things, businesses, think of BPOs primarily, outsource customer support, outsource app development. This has seen a major boost in demand because, all of a sudden, especially if you're sitting, let's say, I don't know, in London, and you have people on your payroll that are, doing customer support or providing app development, all of a sudden they're now, stranded at home. They're not in the office. You don't see them every day, and they're still on a London payroll. When you can actually outsource that type of service from India, from the Philippines, and we're seeing a lot of that being picked up. And it's actually very exciting because, cross-border services have a lot less friction or are a lot more in tune with the digital economy than goods, which clearly require customs clearance, logistics, and so on and so forth. So really, really interesting developments, very fundamental developments we're picking up during COVID.
That's great to hear, David. And I think you touched upon two very key things. One was on supply chains and the physical supply chains kind of getting restricted because of mobility. And the other one is cross-border or international e-commerce, right? Both very key themes as we hear similar trends across, whether it's in the news or whether when we look at data across organizations. So maybe I could ask you, David, if we could just double click on that a little bit. And, you called it an unfortunate opportunity. Hopefully, at least in Asia, in some of our markets, we are kind of getting into a recovery phase. And with, these two areas that you mentioned, and perhaps any other that you are looking at or focused on, it'll be great to hear from you, David. How do you see that opportunity pan out, and what would be the role that an organization like yours or players in the market might think about from an opportunity perspective, just given what you told us?
I think opportunity all around, during crisis, that's also, very defining times. And in many ways, I think it's fair to say that what we're seeing during COVID is an acceleration of trends that were happening already before. Yeah. So I think it's really pushing entrepreneurs to be a lot more nimble, a lot more digital. And that's the ultimate challenge, by the way, when you're operating from an emerging market that has got capital controls, that has got a lot of paperwork to deal with, a lot of very complicated taxes to deal with as well. That stuff gets, they're realities, but it does get in the way, especially as an SME, as a young company, it gets in the way of getting business done. And so the force, because you have no alternative, the force to basically to look for solutions online, and not only ourselves, I mean, our other distinguished panelists obviously are offering services along these lines, and there's many, many more that are here to really ultimately support our mission statement, which is enabling the entrepreneur economy. So you need to be digital these days. There are no qualms to be had in terms of operating, from the cloud, so to speak. You need to think of it from that point of view, and relook at your business. But still, go and find new customers, sell the products or services, as I was mentioning before, that you've been traditionally doing, just in a different way in terms of delivery channels, which raises other pain points, which I'm more than happy to elaborate as our discussion evolves. But again, it's about really embracing the digital aspect, which means that you don't really need to travel anywhere, for example, which, by the way, cuts your costs. So opportunity all around, let's see it.
Yeah, and you said it nicely. I think opportunity all around. And Donald, maybe it's a good time to come back to your example, because you see the payment side of it, both on being able to receive payments and make payments. With the whole, both the cross-border piece that David referred to, as well as the local entrepreneurs that you referred to, given the example you were giving us. Would love to hear what you are thinking about from what might be those opportunities, and what might be really the need to focus on. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. For global payments, I think one of the key touch point that we have is direct feedback from the businesses who needs to get paid based on the services or product that they sell. And as I mentioned earlier, because of the, and I think also as mentioned by the panelists here, there's an acceleration of trend. And that's sort of like brought forward the digitization piece to someone who has either resisted it or someone that has said that I'll look at it next year. Now, so what it means as well is that for someone from a business perspective, is also to reduce the friction. I think that I would say to a certain extent it's quite a cliche, but nonetheless, it's still a very practical thing to take care of. When I say reducing the friction in this case by focusing on that, it means that not just for the consumer, but also for the businesses that we serve. And as mentioned, from my SMEs, they are likely than not someone who may not have the capital resources to be employing a team of IT personnel, developers to be developing a solution that is that's based on that one. So that's why, for partners like Boutir will be a typical example of how they can help the business to get online. Right? Just don't worry about the tech, don't worry about the payments, just get the things online. So and from that point onwards, it's also a very easy hop for the businesses. And typically for SMEs, there's no MD, GM, finance, and the credit, right? They're usually the same people or just the same number of people. So for them, they need to understand all of this easily, and of course, what based on the and that's sort of like based on the example I gave, the fishmonger. Well, you know what? Not everybody is not camera shy. So, and for these entrepreneurs, they also look at different avenues for their business to get online. So someone like Eric from Boutir will be a good example. So so in both cases, we focus on how to support directly for those who has the capacity to do so. There are a lot of technologies entrepreneurs out there, and there are also equally more number or more entrepreneurs who look at acceleration through platform like Boutir. So we work with partners to get that enabled. But equally at the same time, we also offer these businesses sometimes they do have customer base. They know who to talk to. Some of them are very personalized. I would say not just, to a certain extent, not just SMEs, but to some of the mid-market business as well. When the retail shops are closed, but their customers are still there and they still want to buy, which is a good thing. But then again, we also want to make sure that we are not enabling something that will require the consumer to take a short little course just to get paid. So we also enable solutions that common, easily understood by the consumer, such as a pay by link, an email pay, that most consumers today understand what the email is, how do they read the email, how do they follow instruction in the email. So those are the areas that we look into to reduce and as much as possible the frictions for them to get to pay and to get paid, and then by collaborating with partners and distribution channels.
Great. Thank you so much, Donald, for that. And since you referenced Eric, and Eric, I know you started with the trend that is around digitization. It is a holistic set of opportunities and solutions that we need to, collectively provide. So, Eric, would love to hear from you around the piece on digitization and what are you seeing specific to that, and what are some of the areas that you and Boutir are working around specific to that requirement that is the need of the day-to-day?
Yes, talking about digitization, I think many big companies, they are transforming their business and digitize the business for like 10 years or more than 10 years, but still not very successful until the COVID. So once the COVID come, actually many big companies, they really think way to have some new way to selling things. So before we have to pitch them very difficultly to sell some new product. But now after COVID, actually they are looking for new solutions. So even to those big enterprise, they are very open to find new solutions nowadays. And to small business, I think as Donald said, how we can make it frictionless. So because to small merchant, they don't have the big development team, they don't have much technical knowledge. So how we can help them to bring their business online frictionless. So the way we do is like through collaboration. We have good partner in payment, we have good partner in logistics. So we combine all these different services into a very simple to use mobile app. And then to the small business, they just use the mobile app, then they can bring their business online. And nowadays, I think many people, their personal incomes are being affected by the COVID. So, but now they actually have more time. So they can use this time to learn more things about digitization, like how to create content and distribute content online, how to calculate what are those conversion rate, how to target the right set of customers. And after they learn about these, actually, because they have many different kinds of tools, and the entry barrier is really low. It's not like setting up a physical store, which you have to pay a lot of money to set up the physical store. Now, setting up an online store is really very easy and low cost. So to them, they can like take it as a way to earn more secondary income. So they can have still their full-time job, but at the same time, they can develop their hobby, their interest into something which may be quite niche, but through the internet, they can connect like thousands of fans with similar interest. Then they can, based on their hobby or interest, to develop small business that tailor for that 1,000 fans. And that's already be enough because the cost is low. So it's also helped many entrepreneurs to start their ideas. Because with online, the cost is low, they can just try and error, and then it is very easy to connect to the market and then test whether their product hit the product market fit is welcomed by the market. So I think this is also some good opportunities that help different people use very low cost, easy to get online. And at the same time, there are some other industry are also benefit, like logistics. So when the online sales grow, actually there are more need for the logistics. And we see some new startups, new ideas about logistics. So that also some opportunities in the logistics side, so I see.
Great, thank you for that, Eric. And you very key points, payments, digitization, logistics. I think David earlier had also referenced, supply chains. And another area that is, as we think about these different buckets in the world of a virtual world, as we, I suppose, call it, there's also other areas that a small business typically needs to run their business, which today it's as simple as signing contracts, right? So they wouldn't have that ability to do it face to face, especially when there's mobility is limited. And again, as we think about this along with our partners, like our panelists, as well as Visa, we think about the payment side of it. We also think about some of the ancillary services that might be needed for a small business to be able to run their day-to-day operations, be it cloud accounting platforms or be it, other kind of solutions needed to provide them a holistic service. So, just changing track slightly, continuing from the same theme, what I wanted to ask was, as we go into the digital world, and we've seen, and I think what all three of you have said is right, that we were looking at digitization for a while. The acceleration has really happened over the last 3 months, and this, overnight shift. When we have businesses or individuals who focus on online businesses, e-commerce, or even contactless payments in the physical world, where we are beginning to see a big uptake on that. And Donald, you'll probably, kind of agree with me on this, right? Given COVID, we've also seen a lot of tap and go type of payment processes, so that individuals don't have to, or consumers don't have to touch, the actual device.
Right.
So there's a lot of good innovation that has happened, but it's beginning to really, kind of get embraced right now. What I did want to ask you, Eric and Donald, was how do we think about security and customer journey? Again, because security goes hand in hand with innovation. And we do hear about a lot of risks, and they're top of mind questions, I'm sure, for a lot of folks. So how do you kind of address some of those concerns, and how are you thinking about that?
Maybe I'll take that first. As a payment processing company that's been doing this for the last, I would say, history-wise, the last 50 years, and for the cut rails and in Asia Pacific, which we entered in 2006, I would say that for this particular area, where I see that the picked up on security itself clearly has been accelerated a lot as well with the convergence of technology. Technology such as whether it's a consumer phone or whether it's a credit card terminals. And from what we do and as what we are being required to do, so we definitely provide and ensure that from a payment perspective, I think the security portion is not just really just the bytes and 1 and 0 security, which is definitely part and parcel of what we do. So, for example, ensuring that payments are authenticated. That's probably one of the aspects of security, to make sure that as things goes online, we want to ensure that the pearl fishmonger is not going to be booking all the day stocks are booked and sold, but monies are not collected because there has been lack of authentication. So I think on that piece of it, we clearly work very closely with the standards, regulators as requirements to make sure that the payment methods that we provide fall through, either through partners or through our own direct solutions, definitely are taking care of the industry security, meaning protecting, not just ensuring the payments are received, it's also the one who is making the payment. Information are actually looked after from a security viewpoint. Now, clearly, from that perspective, we are seeing also the uptake as not just the businesses but the consumer. I think on this aspect, the industry player has been doing a lot of awareness. So for consumers, especially I would say in this particular case in Hong Kong, just like a few other economies in Asia, are pretty, should I say, tech-savvy consumers as well. So for them to take up payment that with security built in, is first of all their expectation. I think the level of awareness is definitely high in terms of expecting how they are making their payments through the digital platform. So I think on this particular area, we are seeing actually a common expectation, should I say, in a way, friction-wise, not so much, because we don't see consumer drop. I think the term would say the drop basket syndrome, whereby when it comes to payment, do they actually are more resistive or actually more embracing it? So I'll say, of course, with the solution of this, everybody is knowing that they are not going to be making payments by inserting a card, or the last thing now is a handing over cash. So on the online world, a digital payment, a one-time password is definitely something that they know and expect to do. So that sort of reduce the resistance of someone making a payment. And of course, as the economy opens up, the shops today, we are already supporting contactless payments. So that definitely, it's already a way of life in most, it's definitely economies like Hong Kong, as well as a few other cities out in Asia Pacific. So I would say from that area, we are pretty well placed to support our businesses so that they are able to extend that form of payment to the consumers, both the online as well as the economy open up face to face. And as I'm aware, Hong Kong is definitely one of the market that has already opened up for consumers, for businesses, as compared to the other economies.
Great, thank you, Donald. And Eric, from your perspective, just given that your focus is so much on digitization of, you know, a lot of the small business owners that you have, just in terms of, you could touch either upon the security aspect and how you're thinking about it, as well as the customer journey.
Yes. So Boutir not only want to reduce the friction for merchant, we also want to reduce the friction for consumer. So on consumer side, we see that like online world for customer journey, one more step would lower the conversion rate. So how we can take less steps to help them to complete the whole buying journey. So one of the key point for the payment is like for using credit card payment, then we can combine with Apple Pay and Google Pay. So with this kind of payment method, it is simple, it is secure. At the same time, it is easy. So they do not need to enter the credit card number, just using the face detection, the touch ID, then they will be complete the transaction. So we see that this kind of new payment method, which actually can help to reduce the friction and also increase the conversion rate. So that's about how to make a better customer journey. And in terms of security, some people, they may not have like Apple Pay or Google Pay, but still have something new called 3DS, 3D secure payment method. So actually some of our merchants are suffered by some what we call fraud transaction. So on the online world, security is very important, and there are really some cases that someone may steal the digital, the credit card information and then make some fraud transaction. And for all these fraud transaction to merchant, it is very pain, because when there are this fraud transaction and they cannot prove they actually deliver the product, actually there is a chargeback being made to the merchant. So they give out the product, but they cannot receive any money. So this is a loss to them. But nowadays, with 3D Secure, these features, actually it's lower the fraud transaction a lot. And at the same time, the liability actually shift away from the merchant. So the merchant has no resistance in accepting credit card payment with like this kind of security features like 3D Secure, because they know that this is secure and there are no way for them to suffer by the fraud transaction as before. So I think adding this kind of security features actually also help to remove the friction for the merchant to do online, to accept online payment.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Eric. And it's a really good point you raised, which is security doesn't need to be at the cost of a great user experience. I think that's the key point, and that's absolutely spot on. I realized we are almost at the end of our panel discussion. That's what happens when you have such an engaging set of panelists, you know, talking to us. So probably, you know, we just have time to kind of, you know, do a quick wrap up. And I'll ask the last question, and maybe David, you could give us your insights, just in terms of what you think, you know, as an industry, as we look at recovery and digital commerce, and given your focus on also international businesses, what do you think as an industry we should be focusing on?
I think it's to bring in the ancillary services that are not traditionally thought about as finance, but nevertheless really solve pain points that the customer base that any particular company is focusing on. Specifically, an example I can give is that, as you know, our customers are these B2B exporters, right, from Asia. What COVID has meant is that they obviously cannot travel, and travel in the traditional face-to-face meetings has been the means where people have developed trust, right, to get to do business together. That is no longer on the cards, and it's much more difficult to engage in this trust. So what we do, for example, is that we bundle, along with a neat business account, a company incorporation in places like Hong Kong or London, to basically give a lot better calling card to these businesses that are coming from emerging markets. Because ultimately, whether it's a buyer of goods or services, there's always going to be a question mark in the buyer's mind of like, oh, What if something goes wrong with whatever I'm buying, a good or a service? I'm going to have to sue this company in its own domestic jurisdiction, in its own domestic courts of law. That's not going to fly, right? So I don't have the trust, and therefore business doesn't happen. So as an industry, I think we need to continuously think about bundling other solutions that are not traditionally in our zip code to, again, solve pain points for customers, because that's what matters, making customers happy.
Great. Thank you for that, David. And I think this panel is a good testament to that, right? We have yourself, David, with Need, Boutir, Global Payments, Visa, and we all partner as well together to bring our expertise to provide holistic solutions to the ecosystem as well as our small business community. So spot on, kind of not just thinking about the sliver of what we provide, but the larger ancillary and other services that might be needed. So with that, let me actually open it up and see if we have any questions. I didn't see any questions come in, but maybe we can give it a few seconds in case there are any questions. Because I think we have just a couple of minutes more. Okay. So I don't see any live questions come in. Of course, if there are any questions that anyone has, if you're shy, please do send them into the organizer, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. I do want to take the time to really thank our panelists. I think, David, bringing your international experience, great inputs. Eric, of course, a lot of the digitization and customer journey experience, as well as Donald, from a payments and security perspective. I think we learned a lot today. So really appreciate the time. Thank you very much for your insights. A lot to think about as we get into the next 12 months, both with opportunities and the creative solutioning that a lot of players can do in the markets to just make sure that goods and services, supply chains continue to be smooth, payments continue to be smooth and secure. So with that, thank you, everybody. Walter, I'll hand it back to you.
Chavi, Jafa, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for the remarkable insights on that panel. That was brilliant. It really reassures me that I'm in the right place in the world, and looking forward to the recovery to come, and the ways we'll pay for it, and the ways you all will help us. So thank you very much. Brilliant insights. We are moving on, and we have more to come. So this morning I was on the main stage with Karina, and she mentioned that 8th of July is the anniversary of the founding of GoGoVan. So in advance, Karina spoke with the co-founder, Reef Kwan, at GoGoVan, and apparently, I believe, there is a little bit of news to be dropped in here.